Alessia, and you're listening to episode number 3 of Voices of Italy. Today, we're really going to the heart of this podcast theme because I wanted to analyze with you a particular stereotype associated to Italians, what I have now started to call the stereotypical goofy Italian guy. You know, that guy, that one that you're thinking right now that makes jokes all the time and thinks about food all the time, and it's super inflexible when it comes to Italian food. He loves his mama maybe a little bit too much, that goofy Italian guy. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. And I have to say that my international relations master's degree, that is usually not very useful, today was to inspire this episode, because we're not simply talking about the stereotype in itself out there. I'm going to see with you some cases of Italian figures that have portrayed these cliches, but they have turned them into something that is attached to their brand, their public persona, in a world that has sort of educated us to respect people, their culture, to not to rely too much on stereotypes that they can easily turn into offensive attitudes and comments. Well, Italians don't seem to mind too much. I think we sort of welcome that stereotype because it's useful. It's been really useful for our marketing and PR history after World War II. So I thought in this episode to analyze the cases of popular modern Italian figures that have turned those well known cliches into a global, profitable brand. Italy is one of the most iconic countries in the world. But what does Italy mean to the world? What does it mean to you?
Buongiorno.
Pizza.
Ciao Bella.
Michelangelo.
Spaghetti.
Mafia. Dolce Vita.
My name is Alessia, I'm Italian, and this is Voices of Italy, the podcast that peels back the layers of the Instagram perfect Italy to reveal everyday stories of authentic, surprising, and messy Italian life. Okay, so the goofy Italian guy, what I'm talking about here is that group of internationally recognized Italian traits, the really high passion for food, expressive hand gestures, deep family bonds, or in the case of men, the Don Giovanni attitude, very romantic and passionate with women. So, this is what I mean with the goofy Italian guy stereotype. And I am wondering if this sort of became our national PR strategy. In a way, it really reminds me of something we were already doing after the Second World War, a concept that we are familiar with, that in Italian we call Italiani brava gente, so the good people, which is a phrase that started to be adopted, as I was saying, after the war by historians to refer to Italian popular beliefs about the fact that Italians were actually quite limited in their participation to the Holocaust and to all the terrible things that Germany had done in the Nazi party. So it became this belief around the fact that, yeah, we didn't really participate to those war crimes that much. So it was kind of a promotion of the good side of Italian people to go beyond what our terrible reputation was because of fascism and the war. In a certain way, this soft power that we tried to get back with the Italiani brava gente concept is happening also with the goofy Italian guy concept. Yeah, it's a little bit about soft power. It's an image of Italian people that is turned into a national marketing strategy. So, is this use of exaggerated traits sort of a clever way to boost Italian soft power? Sometimes it also can feel like the opposite because the stereotypes associated with Italian people can be silly. They're not necessarily all really nice. When I was preparing the episode, this person immediately came to my mind, and I'm talking about Gino da Campo. Even if the name is not familiar, you might be familiar with a video or two that you've seen online. He's sort of the culinary Italian champion out there, essentially a celebrity chef. He's based in the UK since he was 19, where he became very, very popular for appearing in or hosting food focused television shows. And in particular, he's famous for his appearances on the show This Morning and for his comments, his reaction to anything that is related to Italian food or how it is perceived or how it's talked about. If people are not, extremely attentive in the way they talk about Italian food, he immediately has a very fiery reaction. And you probably heard a particular catchphrase that became famous online from one of the episodes of This Morning.
Do you know,
Tell me.
if it had like ham in it, it's closer.
No.
It's closer to a British carbonara.
Oh no.
It is. No, that's true.
Oh well, that's fine. I'm glad you're standing there.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
If my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike.
Essentially, the host of the program was telling Gino that if the carbonara had ham as the main meat, it would be like a British carbonara. That's all she said. And he, of course, takes this comment really, really seriously to say that that statement made absolutely no sense, that Italian dishes are sacred the way they are and you really shouldn't change them. So I really think he embodies perfectly this side, at least the food related side of the stereotype that we are so inflexible and we have this exaggerated reaction that people don't really get offended for because the topic of food is not so serious, so nobody really takes it on to Italian, at least publicly, to say that our attitude is arrogant or offensive, because it's one of the very few things that we all agree brings joy and good mood to people. So it's something not to be taken that seriously. But as I was saying, Gino da Campo, at least the way he became famous, clearly a big part of his public identity is related to these cultural traits, this Italian accent, passionate defense of Italian cuisine, over the top gesticulations, all this belongs to that goofy Italian figure that I was thinking of. And I really suggest you, if you want to see what I mean, to go and double check. You find all these videos on YouTube really easily. There's an episode of this TV show that I don't remember the name of now, but in one of the episodes with Gordon Ramsay dedicated to Greek cuisine, I think it's a tour travel food sort of show, and that in that episode they're talking about Greek cuisine, of course, and Gordon Ramsay said to Gino that he thinks that overall Greek food was better than other cuisine, even than Italian food, to which of course follows the predictably humorous reaction from Gino saying that you really cannot compare the two.
I think Greek cuisine is better than Italian cuisine. You know that, right?
I can. No, you're not serious. You can't. I mean, say something. Say something.
The thing is, in Crete, for example, yeah, this is one place in the world where people live up to 90, 100 years old there, and that's because of the food and the climate.
Italian diet is one of the most famous diets in the world for people living many, many years.
They live longer here in Greece.
Sima, you cannot compare it to.
I honestly, guys, I don't know almost anything about Greek food. And that makes it really difficult for me to think that my culture is definitely better. And, I completely understand that that's also a TV show, so it has to be entertaining. But I can assure you that it's really associated to Italians, and that certain Italians behave that way. It's not just for show. But in any case, this kind of persona became Gino da Campo's public identity, and it's undeniable the contribution that had on his popularity out there. Another similar case, but in a completely different context, is a person that I learned about actually quite recently. he is the most famous Italian person in Japan. His name is Girolamo Panzetta and started over there as a TV personality on a TV language course sort of program. And later on in time, evolved into a variety show icon in Japan. And he even became a super popular sponsor of, commercials of Italian products, the ones that you can imagine, food, luxury goods, but also for commercials in like Japanese beer, phone companies, a lot of not strictly Italian related things. He wrote books about Italian culture and lifestyle, and he sort of embodies, at least in Japan, the idea of Italian men and is the first name that comes to mind to a lot of Japanese people as soon as you tell them that you're Italian. It really became the symbol of the Italian man in Japan. And his persona is his public character sort of represents the opposite of what is the stereotypical, shy, quiet, reserved Japanese man that maybe has also a scruffy appearance. Well, Girolamo Panzetta is the complete opposite. On TV, you see him elegant, maybe a tiny bit narcissistic, gentle with women, and very loving with all women, starting with his mother. And this generates a lot of interest in Japanese women. It is interesting that this attachment to the mother is seen as something to be respected, something good in the case of Girolamo, but it's not necessarily the same when a Japanese man has this sort of strong attachment to the mama. But this just confirms further that the fascination that women can have with someone like Girolamo comes from the fascination for his country, for his culture, for the fact that he is Italian. So those traits are part of this package that is the idea of Italian man that is maybe in this case slightly idealized because it's seen as always elegant, loving, always romantic, and so attached to their moms. They take care of their moms. So in this case, this is a little bit less the goofy Italian guy, but I believe that it's still part of that package. I was really impressed of how relevant was for Japanese people when it comes to the image of Girolamo Panzetta, his deep affection for his mom. It's a trait that in Italy it's also very relevant when it comes to Italian men, but not just that, more in general to the Italian youth. Maybe Italians have we have this word that is mammoni, which sort of defines in a slightly negative way the strong attachment to the mom that brings you to not moving on with your life, to be a little bit of a loser because you still live with your parents. It has a negative connotation, but like in the case of Girolamo, very elegant all the time, mannered in a certain way all the time. I think in a way it fits really well Japan because they also have a really structured culture and they are very stereotyped abroad themselves. So maybe it just fits them, it just works really well for them. It was a lovely match. But I also started to think about a certain other figure that for me was really worth mentioning when talking about the goofy Italian guy, even though it's a slightly different case and it's a little bit more special. I'm talking about actually Checco Zalone, that I have no doubt all Italians that are listening know who I'm talking about. I am not that sure for non Italians listening, but he is sort of a southern anti hero, if we can talk in these terms. But just to give you a little bit of background for you out there who don't know who Checco Zalone is, this name is a stage name. The real name of the person is Luca Medici. He's a comedian, and his movies have become really big box office phenomena in Italy. I think internationally also. I'm not sure if it's in the European sphere, but he became famous for this sort of satirical portrayal of the stereotypical Southern Italian oaf that is a little rough, a little vulgar, lives a super carefree life. So that's the general idea. Uh, but it's not as simple as being goofy here. It's really a satirical portrayal, a satirical comment, I would say, on Italian society, on its most unflattering traits. And they are accompanied, I have to say, by a very, very excellent storytelling that uses characters and stories and cliches that belong to that stereotypical Italian identity in many, many ways. When it comes to Checco Zalone itself, the character usually shows these super exaggerated negative masculine traits typical of the stereotypical Southern Italian identity. So, someone that is maybe a little less modern, politically incorrect, inadequate to the challenges of modern life in general. And in itself, that's where the identity of Checco Zalone gave him its big fame. Just to give you an idea, two of his movies are in the top three of the highest grossing movies in Italy in the entire history of the nation. Two of his movies are in the top three. Guys, we're talking about a huge success for a market like Italy that really doesn't lack other forms of movie comedy. Italians will immediately think to the cinepanettone, those, holidays, really, really goofy movies. This, it became something historical. And the most successful of those, the name is Quo Vado. And essentially, it explores in a comedic way Italy's obsession with public sector jobs, the posto fisso. And the story is about Checco Zalone, which is a simple man with just one goal in his life, which is keeping his posto fisso, his public sector permanent job, which is a government job. And this is because he loves the security, the benefits. It's really super common. Italians know this. I think we all grew up with our parents telling us to really try our best to get a posto fisso, that having a posto fisso is the best thing that can ever happen to you, because it's usually associated also with the idea that, well, essentially there's not much work to do and nobody can ever possibly take that job away from you. But at a certain point, to go back to the movie, the government approves a reform that tries to cut unnecessary public positions to reduce costs, and this includes Keiko's job. So the thing is that he refuses to leave the job, and instead he gets sent to the most remote location possible, a little bit in the Italian countryside, in the Arctic Circle. Really, they were just desperately trying to make him quit. The movie is rich of these jokes about Italian bureaucracy, generational differences, the fear of change that we have in our society. But then there's also, a good lesson for the protagonist. So it's one of those movies that, yes, is fun, but it's sort of trying to tell you something, and it's trying to do it in a narratively simple, happy ending way. It's very funny, lighthearted, full of cultural quirks that made me think, if you're not Italian and you don't know how truthful a lot of these jokes are when it comes to our society, you're probably missing a big piece of why these movies are good, because otherwise they would just be really goofy movies, that's all. And that's why I wanted to bring up Checco Zalone in this conversation about the goofy Italian guy, not because he very simply owns his success to that stereotype. He gives us a very brilliant take on it, in the sense that, he's making some sort of comments about this kind of stereotypes. He sort of simultaneously celebrates and mocks the very stereotypes that many Italians both love and hate. And on one side, for example, he represents a very decaying South Italy, but that's not, it's not an end in itself. It's often a tool to sarcastically expose also the more bourgeois culture of central and northern Italy, who are, considered more globalized, and they are at times more elitist or biased, and, they are confronted with the genuine nature of Checco Zallone's character and its personality.
Quindi fammi capire, tu sei venuto in Italia, hai assaggiato la nostra cucina e poi hai pensato di aprire un ristorante italiano qui.
Sì.
E senti un po', come lo cucini questo spaghettino qui?
Ah, fratelli, prendi acqua, metti pasta, accendi fuoco, prendi minuta.
Invece la facevo bollire, penso che è stronzo.
Non si scrive l'Italia in vano! Vichingo! Sei un vichingo!
In a way, the stereotype here is used in a less stereotypical way. But if we are talking about the goofy Italian guy, the stereotype today, and how it can be a tool for likability of Italians out there, we just can't ignore social media and social media influencers. Just until recently, I was not aware of the fact that this stereotype, became so much part of social media that you can really identify a whole category of Italian social media influencers. I really have noticed that more and more Italian influencers are becoming viral or popular because of this sort of identity, especially in platforms like TikTok, Instagram, that are so very prone to represent, labels and, very short, easy to catch messages, including identity messages. For example, the over the top behavior related to Italian cuisine and food, family attachment, the lifestyle aspects that we are so rigid about. I found it really, really interesting and a new wave of telling about the Italian lifestyle. It's not books anymore, it's not necessarily culture, it's not necessarily even movies. Now it's out there for whoever is who is interested. Now, the thing is that the stereotype of the goofy Italian guy, in the way that I've been talking about it so far, sort of reminded me of the concept of Italiani brava gente, the good people that I was mentioning before, that is based on these benevolent, positive characteristics of Italian people that sort of, imply that we expect in return for this benevolent traits some sort of indulgence from other people. And in a way, there's a similar expectation with the goofy Italian guy. There is an expectation that even if it's a little bit over the top, a little bit arrogant at times, it's something that it's easily forgiven in light of what being Italian implies. I really see in both some sort of common PR tool, and made me think also to Italian social media influencers that, become super popular on either, especially TikTok and Instagram, with those shorts that tell you about Italian culture in this repetitive, a little bit stereotypical way. And I'm sure that the Italians listening have at some point seen on Instagram one of those short videos. I'm referring to people like, for example, Lionfield Music. They are two Italian social media influencers. As and Italian joy spreaders, as they define themselves. These short videos have certain repetitive structures, like, for example, when they sort of intervene during someone else's meal. So, a non Italian person that is probably eating some Italian food, so they sort of intervene to suggest the best way to eat that dish in the correct way, or to show their disappointment if they're not eating it right. They really embody that super hyperbolic Italian pride that at times can also become sort of self parodic.
He's making pizza. Please don't mess it up. So far, you're doing a great job. I can't believe it. This recipe is making sense. Oddio, this is an historic moment. For the first time, Albert approved.
But there's lots of other influencers like them that embody that side of the goofy Italian guy so perfectly. And it's really much more common than you think for Italians abroad. This is sort of an expectation. They assume if you're Italian, you might somehow get offended if they take you to an Italian restaurant and things are not made in the way that they are made in Italy. It even happened to me to be at restaurants outside Italy with non-Italian people, and yeah, if pizza is not made in a certain way, or some pasta formats are not spelled correctly on the menu, they sort of look at you and they expect you to be deeply indignant with the situation. As you may have noticed, so far I've only talked about men, because I really think the goofy Italian guy, in the way I'm thinking about it, belongs really more to Italian men stereotypical behavior. And I really started to think about the stereotypical traits of an Italian woman abroad usually belong more to, yeah, maybe she's super passionate, very self-confident, super attached to her mama and nonna, and at the same time maybe she's a tiny bit hysterical. One that embodies perfectly this sort of Italian identity on social media is the pasta queen.
Why don't you cut your nails when you're cooking? Because I don't want to. If I wanted to, I would have cut them. I love my long nails. It makes me feel good. It reminds me of my mom, my grandmother. And why do nonnas cook while wearing rings? Because they don't care. It's a sign of love. Someone gave you this ring. Wash your hands. Who cares what your nails look like? Whether they're short, long, or middle-sized. And you leave in the comments, down in the videos, I love you. And I wish for your nails to grow long and strong, and own it. And this is a Pasta Queen service announcement.
Again, even if somehow the name doesn't ring a bell, she really embodies that drama Italian woman. Her style might remind you a little bit of Sophia Loren, that, he's very fiery, has that super proud personality that she sort of shares with also her mama and her nonna. And I find her interesting because I couldn't really find a female example as much as I found, for example, very, very pertinent Girolamo Panzetta and Gino da Campo. I don't think there's really an equivalent for them, but online, the Pasta Queen sort of embodies this female side of the stereotype that is maybe a little less common, or at least a little bit less successful for what it looks like in terms of viral social media content. In general, it's interesting to see how they are really recuperating some of these stereotypes and they are using them in the digital space. It's just that sometimes stereotypes, when taken to the extreme online, can be not just a simple form of self expression, but they can be harmful. But I'm not saying that I see that on social media. On the contrary, I think as long as those representations are a marketing tool and they are, an easy way for people to identify you online, it's fine as long as they are detached by an ideology, a political engagement. Of course, at that point, it could be a little more complicated than that. The problem with the idea of Italiani brava gente, if we want to call it a problem, is simply that it was used to clean up the previous mess that involved our reputation. And I think in general all these people that we talked about today have in common is that they boost the global Italian appeal. But the question here that I have for you is, do you think those people identities, do they make you feel like you're seeing an old style caricature that can at times be a little cringe? Or do you just see the appeal, charm that they contribute to? I definitely think that in a way there is a positive function from a geopolitical perspective. We live in a world that is very complex, and social media sometimes are really a space to find really simple things, simple ideas, simple stories, labels, Instagrammable pieces of knowledge. And Italian identity has elements to use to put itself out there in a sort of global global branding way. Also, as an Italian that works in an international company, and because of my work, I get to travel sometime every year. So I never really felt anything particularly negative related to my identity as Italian. I think we're lucky enough that we can comment on how harmful stereotypes can be. But in this case, I think you can see some of the benefits as well. But in general, that's actually a question for my fellow Italians out there. There's so many of us abroad. What's your experience? Have you ever felt uncomfortable for being identified as Italian or connected to a certain Italian stereotype, specifically related to Italian nationality? Not in my case, at least not in reference to the stereotypes that we talked about today. But I would be curious to hear what you all feel. All these personalities and figures, icons that sort of leverage and at the same time nurture stereotypes, are they still something that you guys feel can be harmful? Do you really think that those stereotypes lead to more popularity, or they kind of don't have much of an effect on a culture's reputation? I would love to hear all you guys' personal stories. Join the conversation with me on Instagram and follow the podcast to be updated with all things Voices of Italy and to hear some news for the podcast in the next few days. If you're fascinated by how stereotypes shape national identity and the kind of goofy Italian guy stereotype that I was talking about, you have to check out Checco Zalone's movies. Quo Vado is the one that I suggest because, again, is the most popular one, the one with the highest selling and popularity. So I would suggest that one, but any of those will be great if you're interested in this topic.